somewhere above the Atlantic Ocean, in the dark hours before dawn, a 200-ton machine carrying 306 people suddenly had no engines, no power, no thrust, no sound at all, just wind rushing past a plane that was now, in every real sense, just a glider. At 39,000 feet in the middle of the night, over water so deep it would take 20 minutes just to sink to the bottom, two pilots were about to try something almost no one has ever survived. This is a story about a tiny, almost invisible mistake and the painful chain of decisions that turned it into a nightmare. But it's also a story about how human skill can pull a miracle out of disaster. This is the story of Air Transat Flight 236. It's the evening of August 23rd, 2001. At Toronto's airport, an Airbus A330 sits at the gate, engines running, ready for an overnight flight to Lisbon, Portugal. The plane is barely 2 years old, practically brand new. Two huge Rolls-Royce engines hang under its wings, each one strong enough to help lift a fully loaded jet off the ground. 306 people board tonight, 293 passengers. Families heading home, students on summer trips, couples on vacation, and 13 crew members, whose job is to get every one of them safely across the ocean. At the controls are two men who are about as well trained as anyone could ask for. Captain Robert Piché, 48 years old, with nearly 17,000 hours of flying experience. Beside him sits First Officer Dirk DeJager, 28, with almost 5,000 hours of his own. Neither of them knows it yet, but tonight, all of that experience is about to be tested in a way that almost never happens in air travel. At 0052 UTC, Flight 236 takes off and turns east out over the Black Ocean. Everything is normal. The fuel tanks are full, actually more than full. They're carrying nearly 47 tons of fuel, several thousand pounds more than the rules require. It's a normal night, a normal flight. For now. But deep inside the right engine, engine number 2, something is already wrong, and it didn't start tonight. It started weeks earlier on the ground during routine repair work. That engine wasn't the plane's original one. It had been swapped for a spare, borrowed from Rolls-Royce, an older model, missing a part the new engine needed, a hydraulic pump. To make it fit, mechanics used a stand-in part, one that looked close enough, one that seemed to work, but it left a tiny gap, just a few millimeters, between a hydraulic line and a fuel line that were never supposed to touch. A few millimeters. That was the whole safety margin, and for weeks afterward, every time this plane flew, those two lines shook and rubbed against each other, slowly, quietly, out of sight. Nobody could see it happening. Nobody could hear it happening. It was a wound. The plane didn't even know it had. 4 hours into the flight, at 0438 UTC, that worn metal finally breaks. A crack opens in the fuel line, and 39,000 feet above the ocean, jet fuel starts pouring out of the plane, silent, fast, and invisible. About 13 tons of fuel every hour. That's more than 3.5 kilograms every single second. The passengers have no idea. Most of them are asleep. In the cockpit, the first sign of trouble isn't even about fuel. It's something stranger. Odd readings on engine number 2, low oil temperature, high oil pressure. It's confusing. It doesn't add up. The kind of reading that doesn't scream emergency right away. It just looks off. Captain Piché calls the airline's maintenance team in Montreal. Together, they decide it's probably a false alarm, a faulty sensor. Nothing serious. They're told to just keep watching it. It's an understandable choice in the moment, but it's about to become one more link in a chain that's already tightening around them, without anyone realizing it yet. Here's what makes this next part so hard to watch. The plane was trying to warn them again and again. The fuel gauge was dropping faster than it should. The computer's guess for how much fuel would be left at landing kept getting smaller, and deep in the fuel system, a backup tank in the tail, called the trim tank, emptied itself far too early for how much fuel they had started with. Each of these was a clue on its own. Put together, they were practically shouting the answer. This plane is losing fuel and losing it fast. But in the middle of the night, watching dozens of instruments, trying to make sense of a strange mix of readings, the crew doesn't connect the dots. Not yet. At 0536 UTC, almost 5 hours into the flight, the key moment arrives. A warning: fuel imbalance. The left side of the plane has noticeably more fuel than the right. There's a correct way to handle this. A checklist exists for exactly this problem, and inside it is an important warning. Before doing anything else, make sure it isn't a fuel leak. But under pressure, in the dark, the crew doesn't open that checklist. They act from memory instead. And memory, even great memory, even 17,000 hours of it, skips the fine print. They open what's called a crossfeed valve, a system meant to balance fuel between the two sides of the plane. It's the right move for the wrong problem, because there is no real imbalance to fix. There's a leak to stop. Instead of just losing fuel from one side, the crew has now opened the gate, pumping good fuel from the left tanks straight into the crack that's already draining the right side. They've just made things much worse, and they don't know it yet. At 0545 UTC, with the fuel numbers now clearly alarming, the crew makes a decision that will save every life on board. They change course. Their new destination, a small military airstrip on a volcanic island in the middle of the Atlantic, Lajes Air Base in the Azores. It's the only strip of pavement for hundreds of miles in any direction. They tell air traffic control they have a fuel emergency. The seriousness of the situation is finally fully understood. But by now, the fuel is almost gone. At 0613 UTC, still 150 nautical miles from Lajes, at 39,000 feet, in a pitch-black sky, engine number 2 simply stops. It shuts down. Silence, where a roar used to be. Piché reacts right away, starting a controlled descent to the correct altitude for flying on one engine. 10 minutes later, the crew sends out the words no pilot ever wants to say. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Air Transat 236. We have lost engine number 2, fuel emergency. Then, 13 minutes later, at 0626 UTC, 65 nautical miles from the runway that is now their only hope, the second engine dies too. Both engines gone. At night, over the ocean, this 200-ton plane carrying 306 people is now nothing but a very large, very heavy glider. With both engines dead, the plane loses its main source of power. A backup device called a ram air turbine, basically a small propeller that drops into the wind outside, spins up automatically, making just enough power to keep the key instruments and controls working. The systems that control the flaps, the spoilers, and the backup brakes are gone. Cabin air pressure is gone too. 5 minutes after the second engine fails, oxygen masks drop throughout the cabin. Try to picture that moment. You're a passenger. It's the middle of the night. You've just woken up to masks dropping from the ceiling above you, and the engine's sound, the sound that had been humming calmly for hours, has gone completely silent. No one in that cabin knows if they'll see daylight again. Up front, Piché and DeJager are doing something incredibly hard, flying a plane that was never built to glide, guided only by military radar controllers on a faraway island, who are basically talking them down blind. They're dropping at about 2,000 feet per minute. By their own math, they have somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes before they'd have no choice but to land in the open ocean, a far more dangerous option. Then, lights, the airfield, still far away, still too high, still coming in too fast. Piché makes a call that pilots still talk about today. He flies a full 360-degree turn, then a series of S-shaped turns on purpose, adding distance to lose extra height and speed, trying to land neither too fast nor too short. There's no engine to fix a mistake, no second try, no going around for another attempt. This is the only shot they get. At 06:45 UTC, nearly 6 hours after leaving Toronto, the plane comes down. It hits the runway hard, about 1,000 feet past where it should, much faster than a normal landing, around 200 knots. It bounces once, then slams down again. With the hydraulic system damaged, the automatic anti-skid brakes don't work. The crew slams on emergency brakes anyway and holds them down. The tires, unable to spin freely under the locked wheels, tear apart within the first few hundred feet. The bare wheels grind against the runway as the plane screams down the strip. The runway is just under 2 miles long, and the plane uses almost all of it, using up nearly 7,600 feet before it finally, thankfully, comes to a stop. Silence. For a moment, just a moment, no one moves. Then, the doors open, slides come out, and 306 people begin pouring out into the early morning air of a tiny island in the middle of the Atlantic. 14 passengers and 2 crew members get minor injuries during the evacuation. 2 passengers are seriously hurt, but every single person who boarded that plane in Toronto is alive. Every one of them. In the light of morning, investigators get their first real look at what almost happened. The landing gear is wrecked, the fuselage scarred, and when they trace the leak back to its source, they find it, a gap of only a few millimeters between a fuel line and a hydraulic line caused by a faulty part swap weeks before takeoff. The final report is blunt. The crew never realized they had a leak. They acted from memory, skipped the checklist, and pumped their remaining fuel straight into the crack that was draining them dry. Air Transat took full responsibility, facing the largest aviation fine in Canadian history at that time. But the real change was systemic. Aviation authorities rewrote the rules, making it mandatory to rule out a leak before touching a cross-feed valve. Airbus updated its computers to flag unusual fuel loss automatically somewhere on a future flight. That change has already quietly stopped the next disaster. Captain Piché became a national hero. He received the Superior Airmanship Award for what remains the longest engine-out glide by a commercial airliner ever recorded, nearly 65 nautical miles in total darkness. The plane itself was repaired and returned to service. Pilots and crew who flew it later gave it a nickname that stuck, the Azores Glider. It is staggering how close this came to a catastrophe. A few millimeters of space, a checklist unread, a valve opened at the worst possible second, and yet 306 people walked away. Every safety rule in modern aviation exists because someone paid the price of learning it the hard way. Flight 236 is a reminder of how fast an instant can turn critical, but it is also proof that skill and sheer determination can pull a miracle out of the sky. 306 people went to sleep on a routine flight to Lisbon, and every single one of them woke up alive.